welcome to the last part 3 of Rebuilding When Life Falls Apart. Today this is called Rubble Trouble, and I'll explain that in a few minutes' time. Well, we've been following the stories of 3 courageous men who were called by God to lead the rebuilding of Jerusalem after the Babylonians had crushed God's people and destroyed their temple and nation. They were given special favour from the king that had held them captive for many years to return to Jerusalem. And if you want to know more of the story, check out the first 2 parts on YouTube on Life Church Wimslow's channel if you missed those. So Zerubbabel returned and rebuilds the house of God. It took him 23 years to do that with a team of over 40,000 people. Then Ezra followed and rebuilds the worship and training in the things of God. He helps the people rebuild. Well, he helps them rebuild internally. He deals with their heart issues, and he finishes his job in just 1 year. Now, maybe you're thinking, great, Paul, but how does this relate to my life right now in 2021? Well, this story reminds us that God is in control of the most broken circumstances, and he can fix, he can rebuild anything. A broken home, a broken church, even your broken heart. He can fix it. So stay tuned for the next hero to take his place in this story. So it's around 445 years before Jesus arrives on the earth. The house of God is rebuilt, the temple is rebuilt, worship and teaching is restored. But there's just one last problem to overcome. Jerusalem and the temple is vulnerable to attack because the famous walls that protect the city were still in ruins. So we turn from the book of Ezra to the next book, the book of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah is still stuck in Babylon. He works for the king as his cupbearer. And one day, out of the blue, he asks someone for a report on what's happening in Jerusalem. And we pick up the story in Nehemiah chapter 1, when Nehemiah says this, verse 3. They came back and they reported to him, and they told me, the exile survivors who are left there in the province are in bad shape. Conditions are appalling. The wall of Jerusalem is still rubble. The city gates are still cinders. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. I mourned for days, fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Once again, like Zerubbabel and Ezra, he was shown favour by the king who sent him to Jerusalem with a team to rebuild the walls. He set off for Jerusalem. Now, just a side note here. God can use any person and any circumstance for his will and his plan. Can I encourage you? Can I just encourage you today? Don't limit God. Some of the most evil psychopathic kings showed favour to these guys, so his purposes would be fulfilled. And in your life today, God can use that difficult person in your life to get you where he wants to get you. They don't have to be believers. He can use anything. He can use a pandemic. He can use unemployment, anything for his best plan for you. Anyway, back to the story. So Nehemiah goes with another team, leaves Babylon and goes to Jerusalem. And we pick up the story in Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 6. It says, So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. So in just a short time, a relative short time, they're halfway through the rebuild. And that's good news, but then everything changes. Let's jump to verse 10. Verse 10, meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the labourers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived nearby, God's people, came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. So things started well. In just a couple of weeks, the wall simply shot up. But then the people started opposing the work, specifically Sanballat and Tobiah. Now, not got time today, but take some time to read how they just relentlessly criticised, threatened and opposed the work. Two guys who had a hidden agenda. Now, they thought they were serving God. They thought they were the good guys in this story, but the fruit from their lives showed otherwise. Negativity, grumbling and criticising. And what was the result? Well, that produced a fruit. It produced discouragement amongst those working so hard to make a difference. And people were just getting discouraged. Just another warning. I don't believe it was a coincidence that the walls were half their height when weariness and disappointment set in. Can I just say, be careful when rebuilding. When you get to that place, those halfway places, I've seen it time and time again. People started well with excitement and with energy and with purpose, but it's usually at the halfway stage when the rebuild isn't finished yet. It's at that stage so often it's easy just to throw in the towel, and people do that in relationships, they do that in jobs, they just get tired of the job, they just get fed up with it. And I can testify they definitely do that in churches as well. There's that early excitement, then there's momentum and team spirit. Can I encourage you today, if you're in a situation, in a church, in a job situation, in a relationship, and you sense that momentum is slowing down, don't quit. Don't quit when all of that good stuff wears off. Hey, if God tells you to move, to finish and break ties then do it, and do it with all of your heart. But if there's negativity or maybe even unforgiveness in your heart, just take a moment, just take a week, take a bit of time, check your heart before you rebuild somewhere else. Yeah. So today I want to look at just that one verse very briefly for time's sake in Nehemiah chapter 4. We've already read it. After the rebuilding had started, it says in verse 10, Nehemiah 4, "Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the labourers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall." Yeah, rubble trouble. Whenever anything has been broken or crushed, you always have the remains, the debris or rubble of the old left over before you can rebuild the new. And that was an extra burden for God's people. Every time they went out to work, they were reminded of their defeat and their disgrace. They were reminded of their past, of their disobedience and God's judgment. Every bit of rubble was a discouragement, and it was wearing them out. There was too much rubble to deal with. And until they dealt with the rubble, they could not build the new. And you and I today, until you and I deal with some of the rubble in our lives, we will never be able to move on to the rebuild that God has planned for us. And often we don't recognize it, but our lives quickly fill up with old rubble. And there's 4 types of rubble I've had to deal with in my life over the years. I'm going to share those with you now. The first is old thinking rubble. Old thinking rubble. It often shows itself in negativity and lack of faith talking. I just want to say, this past week, I've had a couple of messages, emails and texts, really encouraging us over last week and what happened at the Rex Cinema when we all met together. And as we talk about that and talk about this new season as a church, as we chat and message and talk of the new thing God is doing, it creates, it produces, it generates faith. It produces something. It produces faith. Paul said in Romans 10:8, the word is near you. It's in your mouth and in your heart. It's important what we think, and it's important what we speak out. It can make all the difference. Just one encouraging word produces, it generates. However, as well as I know, the opposite is also true. The opposite produces negativity, criticism, and things also produces. It creates fear, which leads to despair. You've met the person that, hey, so how's the new job? Oh, it's a drag. The money isn't good. I'm not happy there. Or alternatively, when somebody says, well, it was an answer to prayer. It's challenging, yes, but I'm staying positive. I'm trusting for increase. That produces something. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5, one of my favourite verses, says, take every thought captive. Why? Because, we're to be careful of those things that we think about, because those things turn into words. As the old Chinese proverb goes, watch your thoughts, because your thoughts become your words. And watch your words, because they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, because your character becomes, finally, your destiny. Remember Ezra? He gently rebuked the people for taking old thinking into a new situation. Why? Because their destiny was at stake. So that's the first thing, old thinking rubble. Next, old relationship rubble. Friend, today there are some people who can't go where you're going into that new season. God loves them. Jesus died for them, but their journey is just a different way. And you'll see this time and time again. And I want to encourage you, don't try, to convince them. Don't spend your time begging or, God forbid, compromising. There's a key chapter in Nehemiah chapter 6 when Sanballat and Tobiah keep asking for a meeting. They keep pestering Nehemiah over and over again. We want to talk about this. We want to discuss this. We don't agree with this. And eventually Nehemiah just responded. He sent a message saying, I can't leave the wall for you guys. I'm doing a good work. God bless you. Be blessed on your journey. But I'm not leaving what God has called me to do, because I'm called to go this way. And whenever there's a rebuild, I've noticed that relationships sometimes will change, and some will go and some will be added and birthed into your life. The third, old practices rubble. Again, we've kind of covered this, but in any new season, in any new rebuild, you'll be tempted to say, do you know what? I've never done it this way before. Which kind of should be obvious. That's why it's called a new thing. That's why it's called a new season. And if that's you today, I just want to encourage you, take a big shovel to those old things, those old practices, those maybe old habits that pull you back, those thoughts that continually drag you down, that turn into actions and practices that are just not worked in the old. So why would you bring them into the new? And lastly, old disappointment rubble. Old disappointment rubble. It's amazing how living a life continually disappointed can hijack your future. Somebody once said disappointment can leave you either bitter or better. And remember the story that we've been covering over these last 3 times together. Each one of the heroes we've looked at started in deep disappointment. We've read that Nehemiah heard the news about the walls of Jerusalem, and it says he wept for days. He was in deep despair and disappointment. But here's the difference. The disappointment became the driving force to seek God and ask God how he should be involved and what he should do, to step up and make a difference, to play his part in this great story. Life Church, the next season as a church is going to be one of rebuilding. In fact, it really has already started. And if you're part of that or not, whether you're part of that or not might depend on whether you can move some of the rubble out of your life. And I know I am daily. No, seriously, I am daily taking a shovel to some of the rubble that lies around my life right now. I'm daily shoveling out rubble from my mind with God's help. Rubble like, what will people think if we do it this way? Am I failing? Am I succeeding? How is the building going? Do I have what it takes to lead these people? Will people turn up or will they not turn up? There's not enough of this and there's not enough of that. How? Why do I take the effort and the time to shovel the rubble? Because At the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about Jesus. It's all about him. It's not about my comfort or my happiness or my life, but it's all about him. In closing, 2,500 years ago, these people were consumed in building a temple and restoring a city. And by the way, Nehemiah dealt with the Rubble Trouble as the good news and finished the work in just 52 days. Zerubbabel took 23 years. Ezra, it took a year, and in just 52 days. And in the middle of all of the challenges, the plans of the purposes of God were being fulfilled. Even when Nehemiah couldn't see the big picture. Because what? Because it was really all about God's plans and all about Jesus. That's why from the moment Ezra got the word from Haggai, and from the minute Zerubbabel left for Jerusalem, and even before Nehemiah got involved, they were all going to succeed. It was all going to happen. Why? Because it was all about Jesus. He was at the center of it all. And when you put Jesus at the center, when he is at the very center of your decisions, your plans, your calendar, even your finances and job and family, in the center of your rebuild, you simply join this long list of believers, of God followers, whose lives meant something even in the middle of troubles and broken times. And that's that confidence that Jesus has got me, that it's all going to be okay. I'm putting him first, so I believe he's got this. That's what you need in your life today. Friend, today, he's got you. He's got your family and your job and your future. Life Church, hey, Life Church, he's got us. It's okay. We're right where he wants us, and it's time to rebuild. Will you watching this today, if you're part of Life Church, will you be a Nehemiah, an Ezra, a Haggai, or a Zechariah? Take your pick, but will you take your place in this great story that God is building at this time? Because it's not about me or you or temples or churches or building or programs. No, it's all about Jesus, for his glory and for his fame. Whatever has been in the past, my friend, today, will you join us? Let's rebuild together.